A very good evening. You're watching The Burning Question and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. A lot of you today have been thinking and perhaps hoping that there's going to be a landmark historic judgment from the Supreme Court. This is about the same-sex marriages in the country. But that has not happened. Now, does this mean that we as a country are not ready for equality? Equality is just a lip service in the country? Or is the time not right? And that is why the Supreme Court for the moment has said we can't get into this legal framework right now because we are not in the business of making laws. So the Parliament, the legislature, will be taking a call on whether same-sex marriages are allowed in the country and they can be legalized, they can be formalized. Remember, this is an issue that you have seen some very, very fierce opinions on. The Chief Justice of India himself, remember, had been speaking about why he believes it's important to take that important logical next step. But this has not been a unity judgment, remember, because this is a split verdict, 3-2. And before we actually deep dive into getting you more highlights of this entire judgment, the parts of which now you will see also on our screens here behind me, what the verdict really means, it means that there is a step forward in the rights for same-sex couples, but have we as a country missed the opportunity? This is a question still a lot of people are asking. Because the Supreme Court, many are also saying, has been rather conservative in not taking a step forward, but some say this is the right way ahead because it's only the Parliament of the country that can legislate or make laws. This also means that the onus now is in the Parliament to legislate on the same-sex marriage. Now, do remember, for those of you not very familiar with the course of the entire story, that initially it was the Parliament only that was supposed to take a call. But because the Parliament did not take a call, that is why the petitioners, about 21 of them, decided to approach the court. But the court today has again said that the onus now is on the Parliament, our member of parliaments, to take a final call. The centre has been directed to form a high panel committee to be examining the rights and the benefits. This, many would say, is a step forward at least. In the country, there is conversation now, there is going to be a deliberation on how you can give better and equal rights to the members of the LGBTQI community. And interestingly, this has no deadlines. But whether it's the government of the day or a lot of other political parties, remember, because they depend on their own core constituencies, we haven't seen them very forthcoming in giving equal rights to members of the LGBTQI community. So this is exactly how the verdict is going to span out. But what happens from here on? Now, you have seen a lot of reactions through the day. And a lot of these reactions talk of disappointment. But what is it that this entire committee will be looking at? And this, many would say, is the biggest disappointment. The community and the queer people actually wanted adoption rights. But those adoption rights of the queer couples, for the moment, has been denied. It is a committee now that's going to be sitting together and will be discussing whether this can be made possible or not. This brings us to the next step that will be discussed in that committee. Social benefits like ration card and a lot of other beneficiary documents, remember, that right now, because of the absence of any legislation, has not been done. But the committee's mandate is to be looking into this. This is a directive, again, that has come in from the Apex Court. This will bring us to the next step and the next domain that this entire committee is going to be looking into. And remember, there are multiple areas that are called ancillary rights into which this committee has to look into. The rights for a joint bank account. For a long, long time, this also has been a pending demand of the community that why can't we, much like other couples, have joint bank accounts, nomination, and a lot of other beneficiary details. So again, this committee is going to be doing much of that. The mandate is huge, but because there are no timelines, the community says we do not know whether this will happen or not, whether the Parliament is going to be doing this or not, and they said we were looking for a breakthrough. Remember, till now, there are about 32 countries around the world, 32 countries around the world that have legalized the same-sex marriages. Now, important also to bring you highlights of what we've heard from the court. Now, the CJI's take on gay marriage is simple, and I quote him now. dealt with the issue of judicial review and separation of powers. Now, this is again significant. Why is separation of powers such an important thing? The centre, remember, in its affidavit also that they had submitted before the court, had spoken about this, that this is not the domain of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court must stay out of it. And they said that this is the domain of the legislature, as in the parliament. And the Supreme Court, having gone into the entire issue, there was a 5-judge bench looking at the entire issue, said, yes, the parliament will be doing that. The next important quote, where the CJI says, and I quote him again, each of the 3 organs of the state perform distinct functions. And you cannot cross those lines. You should allow that exercise to be done, to be debated, to be discussed only on the floor of the parliament. The court can't undertake an exercise of reading meaning into statute. Now, in the absence of a statute, remember, it's only the parliament that can and should be making laws. That's exactly how you have seen a devolution of powers in our system, in our constitution. And that's exactly what the CJI says, that the court cannot be undertaking exercise of reading meaning into the statute. This is the job of the parliament. The parliament only will be doing this. Our next top quote, for Parliament to decide on the change in regime of Special Marriage Act, the SMA, like you must have read the judgments, it says the Special Marriage Act again and again. This, remember, again is talking of man and a woman, a biological man and a biological woman. And there are multiple such laws, whether it's the Domestic Violence Act, laws related to inheritance, to alimony, all those will have to change. And the CJI also opines that if the SMA, as in the Special Marriage Act, is struck down, it will take country to the pre-independence era. So this is the distinction that the top court is making while they say that these are the reasons why we believe that the parliament is the best place where you can have a conversation on this, and where you will also be discussing a lot of other laws, whether that is the Hindu Marriage Act, whether that is the Special Marriages Act. And in the middle of all this, there has also been a lot of conversation about, again, like I said, whether this has been a missed opportunity. Now, I was just trying to read through what, remember, the centre's affidavit in the court has largely been. The centre has taken a stand that, before I tell you about the centre, another important take, I think that's on our screens now, that the court must be careful to not enter into the legislative domain. Again, the court has done much of that. But just referring to what the centre has said again and again, there is a political constituency that every political party needs to adhere to think about. And the centre again has been saying, and there have been multiple leaders from the ruling party, from the other opposition parties, who've said that this is against our culture. ये हमारी संस्कृति के खिलाफ है. And in case you let something like this happen, they say this will create a havoc in the society. So again, this is just a quick prelude of what this will entail. But it's important also, remember, to see what has happened through the day. What are the kind of highlights? What are the kind of responses we've heard from those who were arguing for it versus those against it? Before we deep dive into this conversation with our special panel of guests in just a moment, sit back and watch what has happened through the day, and then we'll get you those responses.
After months-long arguments, demands from LGBTQ community and civic groups, the Supreme Court has not legalized gay marriage and said it is up to the Parliament to legislate. The top court has recorded that Centre will form a committee to examine the rights of LGBTQ community.
3:2. We have taken 3 steps back and 1 step, 3 steps forward and 1 step back, but that's all right. I know that we weren't expecting miraculous change with this verdict. But we did know that what is more important is during the pronouncement of the verdict, the statements that were made. And it again put the onus on the central government and the state government to legislate laws, to get in laws, to recognize same-sex relationships. That is the need of the hour.
Speaking on verdict, government's top lawyer, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, said that the judgment balances individual interests with societal interests and provides insight into working of Parliament, executive and judiciary. This judgment by the Supreme Court is certainly a step forward towards in rights for LGBTQ community. Bureau Report, Republic TV.